Welcome. Listen to this next Agile Vocalist blogcast.
Pamela Rose is a San Francisco jazz and blues vocalist who's thrilled local and international audiences for decades with her swinging, soulful style. Rose has performed at clubs and jazz and blues festivals throughout the United States, Germany, and Denmark. She has 6 recordings to her name, including the NPR-featured You Could Have It All. In recent years, Rose has toured nationally with her critically acclaimed show, Wild Women of Song, Great Gal Composers of the Jazz Era, performing at a range of venues including SF Jazz, the Monterey Jazz Festival, Stanford Jazz, Cal Performances, Copenhagen Jazz Festival, Yoshi's, the Fillmore Jazz Festival, and more. Please join me for this conversation celebrating Women's History Month and International Women's Day with Pamela. I'd love for you to kick it off with talking about how you got your roots in singing.
Oh, well, like I tell my students, I think we all come out singing. Just some of us stop doing it. Um, I I always loved to sing, but I was very introverted, and uh, uh, me and my sisters would. I think what we all did, you'd put on the records and you'd grab your hairbrush as a microphone and you do all the backup parts, and one of you would do we would do that. Um,
Do you have any
and
favorite songs from those memories with your sisters?
we knew every song from Bye Bye Birdie. That I definitely remember. The
Okay.
Hi Sally, and we do the little dance. And I wanted to be Anne Margaret always, but
Ah.
I didn't take singing that seriously. At some point in the late 60s, because I'm old, like a lot of people, I picked up a guitar and started writing my own songs and, listening to Janis Ian and, the Folkies and Joni Mitchell. And
Of
I
course.
started writing songs and I would just hang out, with the musicians, musicians at school, and we would jam and we'd play. I can't play very well. I never really learned much about like seriously playing, but I could get my ideas across. And I just loved that. I loved hanging with musicians, but I really loved to write. And that carried me through to college. I was a literature major. I always loved a well-written lyric and song and, the story in the song. I was a huge blues fanatic. So that has definitely colored a lot of how I feel, especially, and we'll talk about it later, I'm sure, but women in blues is really so much of a story of personal freedom, and I was very inspired by that. And somehow, I would find bands and I would show them my songs and I would say, how about doing these songs? And they would inevitably say, yeah, but we want you to sing them. So I ended up, doing a bunch of demos and then playing clubs with people. And I was in a number of um, original kind of blues and rock and roll bands and playing clubs in San Francisco. I played a lot of blues and rock clubs, and that's really how I kind of got my start. I was lucky enough to be asked to join a very big, successful R&B kind of Motown review. It was called Zazu Pitts Memorial Orchestra, and suddenly I was doing 6 nights a week, 2 shows a day, all over the place, all over the country. I sang a lot of jingles. I you know I was doing what I wanted to do, which was
Uh-huh.
to make a living singing and playing music.
Uh-huh. Do you want to, any jingle that you loved? I mean, they all become earworms. They're written to be earworms, but
I was the one that and I just found my old demo tapes, but the one I totally loved was I was the Taco Bell girl for quite a few years, and there was this series of ads they did called "Hello, Hello, Taco Bell," and they had this whole series of them, And Greil Marcus of Rolling Stone actually wrote this hysterical little review about these ads that were everywhere, saying, you know, the salacious nature of this singer, you know, Pamela Rose, who lives in the Bay Area, to convince you that more than anything in the world, she wants that taco, is hysterical. I mean, he was, you know, slightly dissing it, but it was
Right.
quite
Right.
all over the place.
Oh, that's fun.
And I was lucky enough to be one of the background singers on the California Raisin Advisory Board. Heard it through the grapevine ads, and they used my track, my background track, for like everything they did for years. So all the TV ads and all the radio ads, and that was good coin. That helped me out a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, jingle singing teaches you a lot about performance, by the way.
I'll bet.
You know, you have to be very precise as a vocalist, whether it's singing backups, you have to blend right, you have to be right on the money, you know, but there's a great amount of sincerity and authenticity.
Yeah.
You know, you must deliver in 10 seconds. And that taught me a lot about how to summon it up, you know, forget about this thing about I'm not in the mood, you know, you get in the mood.
Right. And just because, you know, as singers in the living through the pandemic of 2020, you know, we're all digital now. And so I'm not getting away with the murder I used to, which was like, oh, well, it's already out of my mouth, so I'm not responsible. But now it's every little thing. Would you say that's true for jingles? Is like,
and it
every
lives forever.
Little thing has to be just nailed.
Right. No, it did. And let me say, oh, you youngsters that are living in that wonderful era of Pro Tools,
Yeah.
You know, recording back then was, you know, there was no pitch adjustment or, you know, I'll just shift this over half a beat, which you can make anything sound perfect now.
Yes.
And I think that has been a great thing, but as it's been a terrible also dilemma, I think, for classical musicians and jazz musicians, because you don't want to sound perfect. You want to sound exactly as you are in the room in this moment. And so it's it's a great tool, but it also, back then, kids, you know, you had to really do it right. And if they didn't have it right, the way that they cut tape, even, you know, like it was literally slicing tape, you know, slicing it and splicing it back together if you wanted to lose a few measures, or, you know,
Right.
that's what you did. It all came out from this kind of crazy moment where I was actually singing in Germany, and I finished a set, and I just happened to notice that all of the songs I had just sung in that set were written by women, and I made an announcement to that degree, you know, to that effect, and it got this huge response, and I, you know, which made me happy. But then I thought about it later. I thought, why were we so surprised? And it kind of got me thinking about all of the extraordinary women that women composers, that it would be great. I just thought, you know, the next record I do, I'm going to feature women composers. And it was going to be a jazz standard, swinging from the swing era. I got this great producer, Leslie Ann Jones. She was very excited about it. And that was it was just a concept album. If you sing for standards for a living, or if you're a jazz singer, you know, you do learn the name of a lot of composers. Mm-hmm. And even if they aren't like one of the Gershwins or Cole Porter, you know, you learn Harold Arlen, you learn Johnny Mercer, you learn Sigmund Romberg, you learn a lot of their names. And then you come to a song that is like really well known, like On the Sunny Side of the Street, right? You know, and you say it was written by Dorothy Fields. Well, who's Dorothy Fields, right? Or You Always Hurt the One You Love, written by Doris Fisher. Who's Doris Fisher? And when I started to dig into their catalog, quite a lot of these women were phenomenally prolific and like important to music, and yet their names are almost usually, they're usually, unless they were also a singer like Peggy Lee,
right,
or Alberta Hunter, you know, some of the singer songwriters. But if you were not that, your name was unknown to us. And I kind of started asking the question, well, why is that, first of all? And second of all, wouldn't it be great to tell these stories? These
It's
Lil
very
Hardin Armstrong.
Armstrong. Yeah.
And she was, and not just his wife, but, she was, if you have pictures of it at some point, you might want to put it up, but, um, you know, she had the the luck to be. She was a really good pianist. She was, kind of classically trained pianist who just fell in love with hot music, with jazz and blues. And the story is that her mother who was just trying so hard to elevate her daughter and not have her fall into, she wanted her to be a good Christian girl, and maybe a school teacher. And
Right.
so Lil, she found a copy of St. Louis Blues, which was
Right.
W.C. Handy's song, the music under her bed, and she whipped her daughter with a broomstick. I mean, so
I
it was
remember
like
reading that.
it was forbidden
Yeah.
music. I mean, if you
It's
were
like,
for the churchgoers,
hmm,
it was like the devil's music.
yeah.
And but little Lil used to go down to, back then, in order to sell sheet music, you always had somebody at the piano in the music store who was sampling the songs for the customers.
Ah,
And she was so frustrated at the way somebody played. She goes, "Well, let me play it." And she played so well
yeah.
that they said, "How'd you like a job?" And she
Yeah.
became the little darling of this store in Chicago. And uh, this great story how Jelly Roll Morton comes in one day, and he's one of the greatest jazz pianists ever,
Yep.
pre-Art Tatum,
Yeah.
and everybody said, "Well, you've got to hear He played, and she was blown away, mostly about his rhythm,
Yeah.
and then she played, and he really liked her, but she said that she was inspired by being that kind of rhythmic player. And
Hmm.
that's what eventually she became part of what was the really early sound that, like, jazz musicians had come up from New Orleans and they had come to Chicago. And King Oliver had this extraordinary band that she was the piano player for. And there's great pictures of King Oliver and Lil that's really famous. And she had a sound that, her job was, because they really didn't have bass players like we think of. They usually had a tuba, and maybe you had drums, sometimes you didn't. So the piano player's job was to send it home. She was such a good rhythm player. And then King Oliver brought up he was a great trumpet player, and he wanted a strong second trumpet, and he brought Louis up from New Orleans, who was a total rube. He was a star in New Orleans. He was an amazing raw talent. But, Lil took one look at him and she said, "Oh my God." He came off the train and, he was like dressed like a country bumpkin and his hair was all slicked back and he was
Uh-huh.
carrying this greasy sack full of fish sandwiches from the ride. And she said, "There's no way." But then she heard him play,
Yeah.
right? And she was blown away.
Yeah.
She made him go back and practice and really learn to read and write music, not just kind of learn, but really understand it, and to play really, have a much better theory idea so that his solos could really soar. And and then later, she's the one who kind of pushed him to go out under his own name, which was because he was quite the star. I mean, people were
Right.
coming to see him,
Right.
and she said, "You should have your own name." And she kind of pushed him to do that. He said he would have never done that if she hadn't pushed him. He was a star, but a lot of his fame, he really owes to her because she kind of put him in that position. And yeah, the marriage didn't last, but he was always
Yeah.
her heartache. He was the one. He was the
Yeah.
one. And yeah, she died 7 weeks after his death, playing on stage, playing a tribute to him. She played
Yeah.
St. Louis Blues, actually.
Yeah.
And at the very last note, they said she just expired right
Oh
there.
my
It was,
gosh.
That was inspiring. Be sure to listen again soon.